A billionaire came home without notice and froze when he saw his maid doing this to his twin girls. Imagine being a billionaire, having everything you want, except for one thing, the smile of your twin daughters. After losing their mother, they've shut themselves off from the world. No one, not even the best nannies, could reach them. But then, a woman with nothing but love and patience walks in. She's just a nanny, but with an extraordinary gift. What happens next will change everything you thought you knew about healing, family, and how one person's heart can transform a house of grief into a home filled with laughter. Grace Williams stood at the small kitchen window, rinsing plates while the evening news talked about Lagos traffic. Her life had been nothing but scrubbing, washing, and taking small cleaning jobs around the city. She was only 24, yet she already felt the weight of someone much older. From the next room, Mama's soft humming brought a little peace into a day filled with worry. Life was simple, money was tight, but her heart was steady. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello?" Grace answered, unsure. "Good evening. Am I speaking with Miss Grace Williams?" "Yes, this is Grace. This is from Adrian Cole Estates. You applied for a live-in nanny position 2 weeks ago." Grace's chest tightened. "Yes, sir." "You've been shortlisted. The role is to care for Mr. Adrian's twin daughters, Isabella, Bella, and Gabriella, Gabby. Salary is fair, accommodation included. Are you available to start immediately?" Grace swallowed. "Yes, sir." The voice gave her the address in Victoria Island. Report by 8 a.m. When the call ended, Grace leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Victoria Island? A new world. A new chance. "Mama," she said softly, stepping into the parlor. "I got the job." Her mother looked up, a smile forming. "God has done it. It's live-in. I'll be away." Mama's nod was gentle and firm, the kind that turns fear into instruction. "Go and do your best. Those children need love. Give it to them." She reached for Grace's hand, then added softly, "Me and your brother will be fine. You don't need to worry about us." From the corner, her younger brother looked up from where he sat on the low stool, hugging his knees. His eyes held a quiet pride, though he said nothing. The silence of his presence was its own blessing, Grace exhaled. She didn't know yet about the gray mansion on the island, the sorrow in its halls, or the twins who had forgotten how to laugh. She only knew she had to try. That night, Grace folded 3 dresses into a small bag, ironed her one good blouse, and rehearsed her greeting in the mirror. She didn't have much, but she would bring the one thing she had in full: patience. Before sleep, Mama's voice drifted from the doorway. "Grace?" "Yes, Mama." "Remember, love melts stone faster than fire." Grace smiled. "I will remember." Sleep did not come quickly. She lay staring at the ceiling. Her mind wandered to the last office where she cleaned, to the baby she once soothed in a market stall, to the way children reach for kindness even when words fail them. She whispered into the silence, "Lord, carry me where I cannot carry myself." Across the city, beyond bridges and toll lights, a cold mansion watched the night through tall glass. A man with a tired jaw stood at a window, not seeing the city as much as surviving it. In a nursery, 2 little girls turned away from each other to sleep, like people who had learned to expect disappointment. Morning arrived like a command. Grace bathed, dressed, and tied her hair in a neat bun. Mama pressed a small Gideon New Testament into her palm. "For pocket," she said. "For courage." Grace stepped into the Lagos sun, into Danfo noise and impatient horns, into a future that smelled like salt air and polished marble. She didn't know the mansion she was walking into had already broken 3 nannies in 2 months. Victoria Island looked like another country compared to Grace's street in Surulere. The air felt expensive. Even the flowers by the road stood straighter. Cars glided past, sleek, tinted, silent. Grace clutched her small handbag tighter, whispering the address again to herself as the taxi slowed before massive black gates. The guardhouse stood like a miniature fortress. A uniformed man stepped out, his face sharp with suspicion. "Yes, who are you looking for?" "Good morning, sir," Grace said, adjusting her voice to sound braver than her nerves. I'm Grace Williams. I was told to report for the nanny position. He studied her handbag, her plain shoes, her folded posture. After a pause, he pressed the intercom. The gates opened slowly, like a mouth considering whether to swallow her. The compound stretched like a quiet kingdom. Marble caught the morning sun. Glass reflected skies that felt too clean for Lagos. Grace had only seen such houses in glossy calendars. She whispered under her breath, "God, don't let me be small here." A tall woman approached from the steps, hands clasped behind her back, eyes sharp as razors. She was dressed in grey, with a head tie folded as neat as a ledger. "You must be the new nanny," she said flatly. "Yes, Ma," Grace replied, bowing her head. "I am Madam Tina, house manager. I run this house, and I will tell you the truth." She let her eyes sweep Grace from bun to shoe. "Nannies don't last here. The last 3 left in less than a month." Grace's throat tightened. 3? Mr. Adrian is particular. The twins are a lot, Tina said, her lips pulling thin. They walked through a spotless foyer that smelled faintly of lemon polish. The walls rose high, hung with frames of frozen happiness. Grace slowed as her eyes caught pictures. A tall man in a charcoal suit beside a woman with laughing eyes. 2 babies in her arms. Wedding smiles, holiday beaches, christening gowns. Then, no more pictures. Just bare wall. As if someone had pressed stop. The silence spoke louder than Tina's heels. At the far end of the living room, a tall man stood by a glass window. He didn't turn as they entered. His suit was sharp, his posture straighter than the gate bars outside. "Mr. Adrian," Tina said, "this is the nanny." He turned then, slow and deliberate. His face was strong, but his eyes were darker than she expected. Tired. Guarded. "You're Grace Williams," he said. Not a question. "Yes, sir." "You've worked with children?" "Yes, sir." "My children are difficult." His voice carried no softness, only verdict. "We've had challenges with nannies. I expect competence, not chaos." Grace met his gaze, steady. "I understand, sir." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, as though he were testing her calmness. Then he looked away. "Their names are Isabella and Gabriella. Bella and Gabby. They are 2 years old. They were close to their mother." His throat caught, but his voice corrected itself, clipped. "She's gone. Since then, they don't trust anyone." Grace lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, sir." He nodded once, cutting off more words. "Schedule is strict. They eat at 8, 12, 4, and 7. Nap at 10 and 2, when they allow it. Keep them safe. Do not disturb me unless necessary." From upstairs came the sudden wail of 2 tiny voices, sharp as sirens, climbing higher together. "They're awake," Adrian said. His jaw tightened. "Let's see if you meant what you said. Nursery is on the 2nd floor. Madam Tina will show you. If you fail, you leave. Immediately." Grace nodded. "I won't fail." Tina's eyes narrowed as she led Grace to the staircase. "You people always say that," she muttered. At the nursery door, Grace inhaled once. She pushed it open. 2 small girls stood in polished wooden cribs, one glaring with sharp curiosity, the other clutching a blue cloth to her chest, as though it were a shield. Grace's face softened. "Hello, Bella. Hello, Gabby." Bella snatched a toy block and flung it to the floor. The crack of plastic on marble echoed like defiance. Gabby's lip trembled, her sob rising into hiccuped gasps. Grace stepped forward, lowering her voice into a warm hush. "It's okay. I'm the patient kind." The nursery glowed like a dream. White curtains billowing faintly in the night breeze. Toys lined neatly on shelves. Cribs carved with delicate detail. But the dream cracked under the sound. Both girls were crying as if the world itself had betrayed them. Bella, the bolder twin, shrieked red-faced, her tiny fists pounding the crib rails in fury. Gabby clung to her blue cloth with both hands, sobbing in waves that swelled and broke like surf against stone. From the doorway, Tina folded her arms. She had seen this before, 3 times. Each time the new nanny had cracked like a clay pot. She lingered a moment longer, her eyes flat as the cries climbed higher. Then, with a small shake of her head, she pulled the door shut behind her. Grace was alone now, alone with the storm. Grace knelt by Bella's crib. The child hurled her toy again, narrowly missing Grace's arm. Grace didn't flinch. She picked it up, dusted it, and placed it gently back. "You can throw it again if you like," she murmured. "I'll still be here." Then she turned to Gabby. The girl's wide, tear-shined eyes clung to her face. Grace reached through the crib bars, brushing the soft edge of the blue cloth. "Hold it tight, Gabby. I'm not going anywhere." Grace tried the bottles first, pressing them gently to the twins' lips. But they turned away, screaming louder. She lifted them one by one, rocking them in her tired arms. Yet the wails only grew. She checked their diapers, fighting with tiny kicking legs, but nothing helped. Sweat clung to her skin, soaking through her blouse as her arms shook from the effort. It had been her first day when she came in pressed trousers and a crisp blouse, trying to look professional for the family. But now, with the night unraveling into chaos, she reached for the folded black and white nanny uniform laid out for her. She slipped into it quickly, the plain cloth clinging cool against her skin, easier to move in than the stiff outfit from before. Dressed in her new uniform, she bent back to the cribs, her face streaked with determination, even as the twins' wails rose higher. But Grace only began to hum, a tune her mother had used on blackout nights, when the heat pressed against the skin and mosquitoes whined. A lullaby with no words, just a thread of steady sound. She sat cross-legged on the rug, one twin in each arm, her back against the crib bars, her head tipped back in exhaustion. But the song did not break. Bella's wails fell into ragged whimpers. Gabby's sobs dissolved into hiccups. The digital clock blinked 2:11 a.m. The nursery stilled. For the first time that night, silence stretched between the cribs. Grace exhaled, her body aching but her voice still low and steady. She whispered into the quiet, "If you wake again, wake me too. We'll cry together if we must." At the door, unseen, Adrian lingered with his hands in his pockets. He had braced himself for the usual end, another nanny crushed by his daughter's cries. Instead, he found Grace, humming low, holding them close, her patience steady where others had cracked. For a moment he saw his wife's shadow there, the same calm strength, the same refusal to let go. The memory struck hard, raw, as the day he lost her. Adrian's throat tightened. He turned away, retreating like a man who had touched a fire too close to his grief. In the nursery, Grace slept sitting up, both twins curled against her chest, as if their tiny bodies were already testing her promise. "I won't leave." By morning the mansion was waiting for the old story to repeat, but a new chapter had begun, and no one knew how far Grace would take it. Morning sunlight spilled into the nursery, but it did not bring peace. Bella refused her pap, turning her head with the stubbornness of a queen. Gabby agreed to eat, but only if Grace sang between each spoonful. Grace hummed, spoon, song, smile. Half the food landed on the floor, but at least some went in. By 10 o'clock, nap time arrived. Bella snatched the pink blanket from her sister. Gabby screamed, pulling it back with surprising strength. The cries clashed like sirens. Grace moved fast. She pulled the blanket from their little tug-of-war, kissed it, and pressed it against Bella's cheek. "This one smells like a cuddle," she whispered. Bella froze, suspicious. Then slowly she tucked it under her chin. Gabby clutched her pink blanket, sniffled, then sighed with relief. At last. Silence. 2 little bodies sank into sleep. Grace slumped against the crib, her chest rising and falling like she'd just run a marathon. Her arms ached. Her hair clung damp to her forehead. But for the first time since morning, the room was still. Her phone buzzed. "Mama." Grace slipped into the hallway, answering in a whisper. "Mama?" Her mother's voice came calm, steady, like a lullaby that belonged to another world. "I just wanted to hear you, Grace. How are you holding up?" Grace's throat tightened. She glanced back at the nursery door, afraid the sound of her heart alone might wake the girls. It's hard, but I'm still here. A soft laugh came through the line, warm and unshaken. Of course you are. You've always had patience in your bones. Don't forget, love melts stone faster than fire. Grace closed her eyes. The words wrapped around her like armor. Yes, Mama. The call ended. The silence held for a moment. But deep down, Grace knew. This rest would last only a few minutes. When they woke, chaos returned. The twins began tossing biscuits from their high chairs, one by one, like coins scattered in the street. Grace bent, again and again, picking up every crumb, wiping every surface, swallowing her frustration as if it were water. From the doorway, Madame Tina appeared. Her sharp eyes narrowed. She had seen this scene before. Food on the floor, toddlers in rebellion, nannies ready to break. But what she saw this time stopped her. Grace was not crying. She was not snapping. She was sitting cross-legged on the rug, calm as the sea after a storm. Bella leaned over her shoulder, combing Grace's hair with a plastic fork. Gabby, giggling softly now, pressed biscuit-stained fingers against Grace's cheek, as if marking her as their own. Grace let them. She smiled through the crumbs and mess, her patience turning into play. She giggled softly, wiping her cheek. If we make a mess, we clean it together, okay? She said with a wink, her voice warm and teasing. Tina blinked, confused and left without comment. And for the first time in that house, the nursery did not feel like a battlefield. It felt almost like a home. By noon, whispers began to ripple through the staff. The driver passed the nursery twice. A cleaner pretended to dust the hallway longer than usual. Everyone wanted to see if Grace would survive her second day. The twins were famous in this house. Not because they were cute, though they were, with soft curls and button noses. They were famous for breaking grown women. But now, Grace was still here. Tired, yes, but her voice was calm. Her song was steady, her arms strong. In the kitchen that evening, the cook shook his head, his voice low. This one won't last, not with those twins. Nobody can. The housekeeper, her eyes briefly flicking to the hallway, lowered her voice even further. She's lasted 2 days, through the night, through the chaos. That's already a miracle. Upstairs, in the silence of the nursery, Grace folded tiny clothes into neat squares. She looked at the sleeping twins and whispered, "Small progress is still progress." In the corridor, Adrian paused by the door. He listened, not to crying, but to silence. For a long moment, he didn't know whether to step in or stay hidden. His jaw clenched, his chest tightened. Then he walked away. The house believed it was only a matter of time before Grace broke. But on the second afternoon, Grace decided to test her own idea, a simple plan that would change everything. The afternoon heat pressed hard against the mansion's glass walls. The nursery air was thick, the twins restless. Bella kicked her crib like a drummer. Gabby's whimpers built toward another storm. Grace wiped her forehead and looked around. The room was too polished, too closed, too heavy. Children are not flowers for display, she thought. They need air. They need space. She dragged a large plastic basin onto the tiled patio. The cleaner passing by raised an eyebrow, but Grace didn't explain. She rolled up her sleeves, fetched the garden hose, and filled the basin with cool water. When she carried the twins outside, Madame Tina appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Letting them breathe," Grace said simply. Bella and Gabby sat in the basin, their little playtops clinging as the cool water touched their skin. Toes curled, eyes wide. They hesitated, suspicious, uncertain. Grace crouched beside them, dipped her hand into the basin, and splashed gently. "See? Just water. Play." Bella blinked. Gabby clutched the rim. Then Grace lifted the hose, set it to a gentle spray, and let a soft rain fall over their heads. Bella squealed, sharp, high, bright. Gabby gasped, then burst into giggles. Little hands slapped the water, little feet kicked and splashed. They splashed each other like they had discovered a new world. Grace laughed, unable to stop herself. "Small, small, my queens," she said, though her grin betrayed her. She wiggled the hose like a ribbon, and the twins squealed louder. From the veranda, Adrian stopped mid-phone call. His voice trailed off. He lowered the phone from his ear. There on the patio, his daughters were laughing. Not polite chuckles, not the forced sound people make to please adults. It was deep belly laughter, real joy. He stood frozen. The last time he had heard that sound, Naomi had been alive, holding them in her arms. He had told himself that laughter moved out of the mansion the day she left, but here it was again, falling like rain. Grace kissed each wet forehead, pretending the hose was a microphone. "Say ah," she teased. "Ah," Bella shouted. "Ah," Gabby whispered, then giggled. Adrian's lips moved before he realized it. A smile. Small. Real. It sat on his face like sunlight he hadn't felt in a year. For a brief second, the mansion forgot it was heavy. It remembered it was a home. Grace looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. She only nodded once, like people do, when they both recognize a miracle. That night, when the house braced itself for another storm of crying, a deep calm settled instead. Not the silence of fear, but of peace. Yet Adrian Cole did not sleep. In his study, papers and contracts lay scattered across his desk, waiting for his pen. But his eyes never touched the numbers. His gaze stayed fixed on the CCTV monitor, replaying the scene from the patio. His daughter's laughter, their joy, and the woman who had made it possible. Over and over again, he watched the same moment. Bella splashing, Gabby giggling, Grace bending low to steady their little hands. The sound wasn't captured by the camera, but he could hear it anyway. In memory, in imagination, the raw, sweet laughter of his daughters. He pressed his palm to his temple. He had built his empire on control, on predicting outcomes. But nothing about this felt predictable. Laughter had returned to his house, and it unsettled him more than the tantrums ever did. He picked up his phone. His thumb hovered. He typed, "Adrian, thank you for today." He stared at the words. Too soft. Too strange. He deleted them. Tried again. Deleted again. His jaw tightened, but the silence in the room grew heavier until he finally hit send. Across the mansion, in her small room near the nursery, Grace's phone buzzed. She rubbed her tired eyes and checked the screen. For a moment, she wondered if she was dreaming. The message was simple, almost awkward. She typed back, "Grace, we will keep trying." She set the phone aside and lay back on the bed. Her muscles ached. Her arms still felt the weight of the twins. Yet she smiled into the darkness. Back in the study, Adrian exhaled slowly when he read her reply. He leaned back in his chair, shutting his eyes. The sound of laughter slipped into his mind again. Not a ghost this time, but something alive. In the nursery, the twins shifted in their sleep. Bella murmured. Gabby rolled closer to her sister, clutching the soft blue cloth. Their breathing fell into rhythm. The house, which had long forgotten music, held its breath as if listening. Grace whispered into the stillness of her room, a prayer soft enough that only God could catch it. "Let me not fail them. Let me not fail you." Down the hall, Adrian whispered something too, though his voice cracked under its own weight. "Naomi." They laughed again today. Neither knew what the morning would bring. But for the first time in a long time, both slept with a little hope. The week began with sunlight and ended with shadows. At noon on Thursday, Bella pushed away her food with unusual force. Her cheeks, normally flushed with mischief, looked pale. Grace touched her forehead. Warm. Too warm. By 1 o'clock, Gabby's skin was hot as well, her small body limp against Grace's chest. Grace's stomach knotted. She checked the thermometer twice. Both twins had fevers climbing fast. "Madam Tina," she called, steady but urgent. The house manager entered, frowning. "What now?" "They're burning. I need to see Mr. Cole." "He traveled this morning," Tina said. "Business in Abuja. He won't be back until tomorrow." Grace didn't wait for permission. She packed a small bag, diapers, wipes, bottles, thin blankets. She lifted both girls onto her hips and told the driver firmly, "Nearest hospital, now." The driver blinked at her authority but obeyed. The emergency ward hit her senses at once. Bright lights, antiseptic sting, nurses moving quickly. Bella whimpered weakly. Gabby had stopped crying, which frightened Grace more than any scream. The doctor hurried them in. "High fevers. We'll start fluids and monitor vitals." Grace stood aside, lips moving in prayer. "God, please. Not them. Not now." Wires, beeps, cool cloths, pressed to tiny foreheads. Bella's small hand searched blindly until Grace caught it. Gabby's eyelids fluttered as a nurse adjusted her IV line. Grace leaned close, whispering, "Stay with me, my queens. I won't leave you." Hours blurred. Chairs grew harder. Her back ached from leaning. Her eyes stung from refusing to close. Yet she never moved far from the beds. Back at the mansion, Adrian returned earlier than expected. He stepped into the quiet nursery. Empty cribs. No note. His chest constricted. He stormed through the halls. "Where are my girls?" His voice cracked. Tina wrung her hands. "Hospital, sir. They had fevers. Grace took them. He didn't wait. He was already out the door. At the hospital, Grace bent over the twins, brushing damp curls from their faces, when a shadow fell across the ward. Adrian. His eyes scanned wires, monitors, pale cheeks, and then locked on Grace. "You should have called again." He snapped, his voice raw. Grace's throat tightened. "I did. I'm sorry." He closed his eyes, the anger collapsing into something heavier. Guilt. "No. I'm sorry. You did right." He moved to Bella's side, taking her tiny hand as if it were glass. Grace stood opposite, holding Gabby's. Between them lay the fragile, burning proof that they were not enemies, not employer and employee, but something else. Two adults fighting for the same children. Near dawn, the fever broke like a storm passing. Bella slept deeply. Gabby's breathing softened. The doctor smiled. "They're turning the corner." Grace pressed both hands to her face, whispering thanks. Adrian exhaled as if a weight larger than money had lifted from his shoulders. He looked at Grace across the hospital beds, eyes tired but clear. "Thank you for not leaving." Grace shook her head softly. "They're my girls, too. At least in my heart." Something shifted in him. He didn't say the words out loud, but they hung between the beeps and quiet sighs. Mine, too. By the time the twins were discharged, Adrian knew Grace was more than a nanny, but he also knew the shadows of grief still lived in his halls, and they would not let go easily. The drive back from the hospital was quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm. Bella slept on Grace's lap, thumb in her mouth. Gabby leaned against Adrian's chest, the faint beep of monitors still echoing in his ears. Back at the mansion, Grace settled the girls in their cribs with cool cloths and whispered prayers. She tucked blankets just right, smoothing wrinkles with fingers still trembling from the night's fear. Adrian lingered in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled. His eyes stayed on the twins long after Grace finished. When she moved to leave, his voice stopped her. "My wife's name was Naomi," he said quietly. Grace turned, surprised by the softness in his tone. "She loved mornings," Adrian went on. "Would sit out on the patio with tea, talking to the babies before they were born. She swore they could hear her dreams through her belly." He gave a small, broken laugh. "After they came, everything changed. There were complications, nights full of fear. I told myself if I just worked harder I could fix it, but work doesn't fix what love breaks." His voice cracked, thinner now. For a moment he looked less like a billionaire, more like a man who had lost his way. Grace leaned against the doorframe, listening. She knew grief wasn't something you argued with. It was like a tide. You let it come and go until it was tired. "She would have liked you," Adrian said suddenly, meeting Grace's eyes. Adrian swallowed, his voice rough. "Thank you. For staying. For not leaving when it got loud." Grace lowered her eyes. "I know loud," she said softly. "My father left when I was small. The house kept shouting even when no one was talking." Adrian's gaze lingered. "How did you stop it?" "I didn't," Grace said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I just sang louder." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Bella stirred in her crib. Grace crossed quickly, laying a steady palm on the child's chest until her tiny breath slowed. Adrian watched. The wild rhythm calmed under Grace's touch, like she carried peace in her fingertips. Something inside him shifted. He had built walls high enough to keep grief in and love out. But in that moment, he realized the walls were not holding. He drew a breath, his voice quieter than the hum of the air conditioner. "Teach me," he said. Grace looked up, puzzled. "Teach you?" He nodded once. His eyes, usually guarded, were open and raw. "Teach me to be what they need." Grace blinked at him, caught off guard by the humility in his tone. Then her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Okay," she said. "We start small. We start now." That evening, Adrian held a bottle for the first time while Grace guided his hands. It was awkward, stiff, clumsy. But it was also the beginning of something no nanny had ever managed before. A father learning to return home to his children. The next morning, the nursery looked different. Not in decoration, but in atmosphere. The twins were restless, turning their faces away from bottles, as if daring Grace to give up. But this time, she wasn't alone. Adrian sat stiffly in the rocking chair, a bottle in his hand. His posture was perfect for a boardroom, not a nursery. He cleared his throat. "She won't drink. Not yet," Grace said gently. "Tilt the bottle, small circles with your hand. Let her feel your heartbeat against her ear." He followed, awkward at first. Bella squirmed, her brows furrowed. Adrian shifted, his jaw tight. Then, suddenly, her lips latched, and she began to drink. Adrian blinked as if he'd just won a silent war. His voice dropped. "She's drinking." Grace smiled. "Because she feels you. Not just the milk. You." From then, the lessons became part of the rhythm of the house. "Let Bella choose between two toys," Grace coached. "She likes control. It makes her feel big. Wait 5 seconds before stepping in," she added another day. "Sometimes they can calm themselves if you give them the chance." She showed him how to read the difference between a hungry cry and a tired fuss, how to carry Gabby close when her fear rose like a tide, how to hum off-key but steady because the sound mattered more than the tune. Adrian tried. He failed. He tried again. His expensive shirts caught milk stains, his hands fumbled with diaper tabs. But every time he looked ready to retreat, Grace's steady voice pulled him back. "Small steps, Mr. Cole. They add up." The staff began to notice. The cook whispered to the housekeeper. "Olga is different. He smiles at walls now." The driver muttered. "I saw him carrying Bella on his chest while making a call. Imagine board meeting with baby drool." Madame Tina, who had once sharpened her eyes like knives, now lingered longer at the nursery door, her suspicion bending slowly toward curiosity. One night, after a bedtime story where Adrian's voice grew less stiff with every page, Bella tugged at his finger, refusing to let go. He froze. His breath caught. Grace leaned close and whispered, "That's her saying she trusts you." For the first time in a long time, he did not retreat to his study after the twins slept. He sat in the nursery, still in his rolled-up sleeves, watching the slow rise and fall of their chests. Grace folded tiny clothes at the table, humming. Adrian's voice broke the silence. "Tell me about you," he said quietly. Grace looked up. "Me? There's always much," he said, "even when we hide it." She hesitated, then spoke. "I left school after my father left us. I worked wherever people would pay me. Offices, houses. Some were kind, some were not. I have a younger brother. He wants to be an engineer. I promised him I would help. That's why I'm here." Adrian studied her face, not as a boss studies staff, but as a man realizing someone's strength was made of scars. The afternoon sun burned bright on the patio, turning the wet tiles into glass. Grace knelt by the blue basin, laughing as Bella slapped the water with her little palms, sending droplets flying like tiny diamonds. Gabby squealed, kicking her legs, holding the rim of the basin as though she might leap right in. Grace lifted her arm to shield her face, her uniform already damp from the girls' wild splashes. Behind them, Adrian stepped onto the veranda. For a moment, he only stood there, silent, watching. His face carried the same guarded distance it always did, like a man who wasn't sure he belonged in a place filled with laughter and noise. Grace noticed his shadow but didn't turn. She let the girl's joy lead the moment. Then he walked closer. His polished shoes caught the spray, dark spots blooming against the leather. He paused, his expression unreadable as he watched Grace and the twins splashing together. And then, without warning, he bent low, picked up the hose trailing across the tiles, and aimed it toward the basin. A thin stream of water arched into the air and fell gently over Bella and Gabby. The girls gasped, then burst into bright laughter, their voices ringing so loudly they seemed to shake the patio walls. Grace's head snapped up, eyes wide, only to be caught in the spray herself. Water dripped from her hair as she gasped in mock outrage. "Ah, so you've joined the fight?" Bella and Gabby shrieked even louder, clapping and kicking, as if cheering their father on. Adrian laughed, awkward at first, rough like a sound unused for too long, but real. Grace tugged the hose from his hand and sprayed him right back, her own laughter spilling free. Adrian ducked, water soaking his shirt, but his smile widened, unguarded at last. The twins joined in, Bella splashing her sister until Gabby squealed so hard she fell into hiccuped giggles. Water sprayed in wild arcs, sunlight catching each droplet until it looked like a shower of glass raining down on all four of them. For the first time, Adrian wasn't standing apart, watching through glass, or keeping his distance. He was inside the noise, part of the joy. From inside the house, Madame Tina peeked through the curtain. Her jaw dropped. She whispered to the cook, "Olga is smiling in the sun. This house is not the same anymore." And for those few wild minutes, there were no walls, no rules, no mansion weighed down by sorrow. There was only a father, a nanny, and two little girls, soaked to the skin and laughing like they had always belonged together. And somewhere deep inside the mansion, the old walls listened and softened. The house had once been a place of grief and broken routines, but now it was finding a new rhythm. What Adrian didn't yet see was that this rhythm was pulling him closer, to Grace, to his daughters, and to a choice that would soon change everything. Later that night, after the twins had drifted into sleep, Grace sat at the small table in her room, folding their tiny clothes. The house felt different, lighter, as if the sound of laughter from the patio still lingered in the walls. A gentle knock broke the quiet. She opened the door to find Adrian standing there, his tie loosened, his expression uncertain. He no longer looked like the distant man of the day, but like someone still holding on to the memory of his daughter's joy. "You handled today well," he said softly. Grace smiled. "It wasn't just me, sir. You joined in. The girls needed that. You gave them more than play. You gave them laughter with their father." Adrian's eyes flickered, caught by her words. He paused, then gave a small nod. "I forgot how that felt. To be inside it, not just standing on the outside. You gave them something money can't buy." Grace said gently, "Your time, your joy." His voice grew rougher, almost to himself. "I forgot it was possible." For a moment their eyes met and held longer than either expected. Then Grace looked down, smoothing a little dress in her lap, her hand steady though her heart was not. In his study, Adrian sat in silence, the day playing over in his mind. The spray of water, the girls' laughter, the sunlight caught in Grace's damp hair. his hand pressed flat against the desk, as if holding himself steady. His voice broke the stillness, a whisper meant for no one but the shadows. "Naomi, maybe love can live here again." Across the mansion, Grace sat quietly by her window, a small lamp glowing at her side. Her Bible lay open on her lap, her fingers resting on the page. She bowed her head and prayed in a low voice. "Lord, don't let me lose my place. Guard my heart. Keep me from stepping where I shouldn't." The house, once cold and hollow, no longer felt like just walls and echo. It was shifting, warming, becoming something more. A home, and as Adrian sat alone, the truth pressed heavier on him with every breath. Grace wasn't only changing his daughters' lives, she was changing his. Sooner or later he would have to give voice to the truth his heart had already spoken. The weeks stacked into something no one in the mansion had expected. Routine mixed with laughter. Adrian learned to burp Gabby without panic, to braid Bella's tiny curls with clumsy but determined fingers. He read short books at bedtime, his voice awkward at first, then softer, smoother. He started holding board meetings with one twin napping on his chest, numbers on the laptop screen, balanced against the sound of small breaths. The staff whispered in corners. "Olga is different. He smiles more now. Even Madame Tina has stopped frowning every hour." But inside Adrian, a heavier shift was happening. One he could not ignore. One quiet evening, after the twins had fallen asleep early, Grace sat at the small dining table folding freshly washed clothes. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Adrian stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the city lights. His hands were deep in his pockets, but his heart was in his throat. He turned toward her, the weight in his shoulders visible, but his eyes open in a way they hadn't been since Naomi's death. "Grace," he said at last, his voice low. She looked up, waiting. "You came here to do a job, but you've done more than that. You brought joy back to my daughters. You brought me back to them." He paused, his words heavy. "I don't want you to remain only staff. I want you to be family." Grace blinked, unsure what to say. "What are you asking, sir?" He swallowed. "Will you stay? Not just as their nanny, but as my partner. Will you be the mother they grow up with? Will you marry me?" Silence held them, not heavy, holy. Grace's breath trembled. "Adrian!" "You can say no," he said quickly. "I will never make your job unsafe. You have a life, a brother, dreams I don't know yet. But if there is a door open in your heart, even a small one, I want to stand there and ask." Grace gave a shaky laugh, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You stand very well, for someone who once ran from feelings." A small smile curved his lips. "I had a good teacher." Her eyes drifted to the cribs, where the twins slept peacefully, unaware that their world was shifting again. She thought of the day she walked into the mansion, with a small bag and a big fear. She thought of tantrums, fevers, laughter in the basin. She thought of how grief had turned into something like hope. "Yes," she whispered. Adrian's shoulders dropped with relief. His eyes glistened. For a moment he looked younger, like a man finally allowed to breathe. He didn't move to kiss her. He only reached for her hand, holding it gently but firmly, as though anchoring himself to a new promise. There in the room where everything had broken, something new was being built. The mansion had seen nannies come and go, but this was different. Soon it would no longer be the Cole house. It would be the Cole family. The wedding was intimate and simple, held in a quiet chapel with soft light streaming through stained glass windows. No flashing cameras, no crowds, just Grace and Adrian, standing before their loved ones. The twins, Bella and Gabby, sat beside Grace's mother, dressed in white, clapping their tiny hands, as if they understood the significance of the moment. Grace wore a simple gown, elegant and timeless, with lace-like prayers woven into the fabric. Adrian stood beside her, dressed in a gray suit, his eyes soft and filled with tenderness. He no longer looked like the distant billionaire. Now he was open, vulnerable, and present. Their vows were quiet but powerful, promises made not just to each other, but in the presence of God and family. Grace's mother sat in the front row, her eyes teary with joy and pride, watching her daughter begin a new chapter. She had always wanted her daughter to find a love that would protect her, support her, and nurture her. Today she saw that love standing right before her. Bella and Gabby, giggling and clapping, sat by their grandmother, unaware of how their world was changing. Their innocent joy added a quiet magic to the ceremony. As Grace and Adrian exchanged rings, they shared a look that said everything. This was the beginning of something beautiful. Not just a marriage, but a family. The twins, with their bright smiles, completed the circle, showing the love that had already woven them all together. One evening, the family sat on the patio. No basin today, just a rug spread with mango slices, and the twins leaning against their parents. The warm Lagos wind brushed their faces as the city hummed faintly in the distance. Traffic, waves, markets, life. Adrian looked at his daughters, then at Grace. "I never thought they would smile again," he said softly. Grace's eyes warmed. "They were waiting for you." He glanced at her, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "And for you." A light flickered on in the garden. The house, once silent with grief, now breathed like it was alive again. The twins dozed, heavy with the happy tiredness of children who played well. Adrian reached for Grace's hand under the blanket. She squeezed it once, steady. The mansion seemed to listen, and if walls could smile, these ones did, because Grace did not run. She stayed. And because she stayed, the house learned to laugh. Sometimes the most powerful change comes from the most unexpected places. Grace Williams was once just a stranger in a mansion. But today, she's the heart that made it a home. The woman who came to care for 2 little girls became the one who healed a grieving family. Her journey may have started as a job, but it will end with a legacy of love that will never fade. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to Folk Tales by Olivia for more heartwarming, dramatic, and unforgettable stories. Until next time, stay loving, stay patient, and keep watching.